That he took the name Pelinal was passing strange, no matter his later sobriquets, which were many. That was an elvish name, and Pelinal was a scourge on that race, and not much given to irony. Pelinal was much too grim for that. Even in youth he wore white hair, and trouble followed him. Perhaps his enemies named Pelinal of their own in their tongue, but that is doubtful, for it means glorious knight, and he was neither to them. Certainly many others added to that name during his days in Tamriel. He was Pelinal the Whitestrake because of his left hand, made of a killing light. He was Pelinal the Bloody, for he drank it in victory. He was Pelinal Insurgent, because he gave the Crusades a face. He was Pelinal in Triumph, as the words eventually became synonymous, and men-at-arms gave thanks to the Eight when they saw his banner coming through war. He was Pelinal the Blamer, for he was quick to admonish those allies of his that favored tactics that ran counter to his, that is, sword theory. And he was Pelinal the Third, though whether this was because some said he was a god-geyser, who had incarnated twice before already, or that simpler, he was the third vision given to Perif, anon Alicia, in her prayers of liberation before he walked among the quarters of rebellion, is unknown. Perif spoke to the handmaiden again, eyes to the heavens which had not known kindness since the beginning of elven rule, and she spoke as a mortal, whose kindle is beloved by the gods for its strength in weakness, a humility that can burn with metaphor and yet break easily and always doomed to end in death. And this is why those who let their souls burn anyway are beloved of the dragon and his kin. And she said, "And this thing I have thought of, I have named it, and I call it freedom," which I think is just another word for Shazar who goes missing. You made the first rain at his sundering, and that is what I ask now for our alien masters, that we might sunder them fully and repay their cruelty by dispersing them to drown in the Topol. Morahouse, your son, mighty and snorting, gore-horned, winged, when next he flies down, let him bring us anger. And then Kine granted Perif another symbol, a diamond soaked red with the blood of elves, whose facets could unsector and form into a man whose every angle could cut her jailers and a name, Pelinal, which is the star-made knight. And he was arrayed in armor from the future time, and he walked into the jungles of Cirid already killing, Morahouse stamping at his side, froth bloody and bellowing from excitement because the Pelinal was come. And Pelinal came to Perif's camp of rebels holding a sword and mace, both encrusted with the smashed viscera of elven faces, feathers, and magic beads, which were the markings of the Eilidun, stuck to the redness that hung from his weapons. And he lifted them, saying, these were their eastern chieftains, no longer full of their talking. Pelinal Whitestrake was the enemy of all elf-kind that lived in Cirid in those days. Mainly, though, he took it upon himself to slay the sorcerer kings of the Aelids in pre-arranged open combats rather than at war. The fields of rebellion he left to the growing armies of the Paravania and his bull nephew. Pelinal called out Haramir of Copper and Tea into a duel at the Tor, and ate his neck veins while screaming praise to Riemann, a name that no one knew yet. Gordhaur the Shaper's head was smashed upon the goat-faced altar of Ninendava, and in his wisdom Pelinal set a small plague spell to keep that evil from reforming by welkind magic. Later that season, Pelinal slew Hadhul on the granite steps of Seatar, the Fire King's spears knowing their first refute. For a time, no weapon of the Aelids could pierce his armor, which Pelinal admitted was unlike any crafted by men, but would say no more even when pressed. When Huna, whom Pelinal raised from grain slave to hoplite and loved well, took death from an arrowhead made from the beak of Selethalel the singer, the Whitestrake went on his first madness. He wrought destruction from Narlame all the way to Seladil, and erased those lands from the maps of elves and men and all things in them, and Perif was forced to make sacrifice to the gods to keep them from leaving the earth in their disgust. And then came the storming of White Gold, where the Aelids had made pact with the Aurorans of Meridia, and summoned them, and appointed the terrible and golden-hued half-elf Umaril the Unfeathered as their champion. And for the first time since his coming it was Pelinal who was called out to battle by another, for Umaril had the blood of the Ada and would never know death.